Welcome back to the BU Politics podcast. Today we're joined with Aaron and Finn, and today we're going to talk about probably predominantly UK politics, which probably from the previous episodes is a relief. So firstly, we're going to talk about Priti Patel and the report that's come out this week about behaviour. Aaron, can we get a quick summary about what's been going on?
Well, basically, there were complaints made about her bullying and attitude and behaviour towards staff, and this report has kind of backed up that claim to an extent, but there's conflicting reports from various people but behind closed scenes about this. But I think the author and the chief behaviour of MPs to the government has kind of resigned following the report and action from Boris Johnson, which is basically to do nothing about it.
Yeah, obviously a lot of this is about treating people. We saw problems with John Bercow last year. And do you think politics actually takes bullying seriously enough then?
It's an interesting topic. It's not something you would associate with politics, but it does exist, and there have been many cases throughout the years where politicians have been known to bully, like Alistair Campbell is a famous kind of example in terms of how he was. Obviously, Blair's spin doctor, but his bullying, his approach to it, and he was almost applauded for taking like a rough, kind of no nonsense approach. So there's like a fine line of what I would say politics defines as bullying, and clearly in this report that has come out, and Aaron referred to Alex Allen, who like led the report on the ministerial standards. He's quit his post today after the Prime Minister basically overruled his advice and cleared Priti Patel of bullying. So clearly this issue has kind of been undermined. One thing's come out, one committee, one report has said that there is bullying, that Priti Patel has kind of used her position and to take advantage of less senior members, and party loyalty, friendship, cronyism. I don't know what it is, but Boris Johnson has clearly stuck by Patel. So it doesn't look forward in terms of setting a precedent for bullying. So, as you say, yeah, it's kind of letting it go forward and not really taking it seriously, which is a shame.
Yeah, Aaron, do you think this is a case of not necessarily Boris not taking it seriously, but just wanting to stick by Priti because he knows that she has built that home department around her?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of precedent for not kind of having action towards bullying or bad behaviour. I mean, Gordon Brown was a key example of someone who wasn't particularly, who didn't particularly behave well whilst he was in government or as a member of parliament. And obviously he became Prime Minister and there was no action taken against him. Same with John Bercow and Alistair Campbell. I mean, the thick of it was pretty much based on Alistair Campbell and ministry and all that kind of stuff. So I think that really nastily people are just going to go into their political camps and kind of say either she should or shouldn't based on the fact that that's what's happened over the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's just a case of sticking by your political allies rather than necessarily taking this issue seriously. Do you think there's something that, I was just going to say, do you think there's something an independent body could do here to actually regulate these sort of behavioural claims?
Well, I mean,
go on.
The issue with having an independent body do that is because at the end of the day, the actual bodies wouldn't particularly have much power because that kind of resides with the leader or the actual party themselves. You'd like to come in there?
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I think you make a very good point that ultimately the people who do have final say is the leader of the party, and the Prime Minister being the role that he has and the power that he has. So any independent body, it depends if it's a purely advisory body. Then the PM does have the power to kind of override the advice. And Patel's come out and kind of apologised for her behaviour. I think she tweeted that she was sorry that her behaviour might have upset people, and and it was never her intention to cause upset to anyone, which is kind of forgiving, like in terms of Boris Johnson's perspective on it. He's very grateful for the work that Priti Patel has done, and it may be a misunderstanding, or you can very easily pass it off as, oh, it wasn't really bullying, it was she's just a strong character. So I think there's a blurred line in terms of actually explicitly stating that Patel did basically take the mick of the powers that she had and used it to her advantage, which is a shame.
Surely, for Boris, it would have been easier just to move on and necessarily take her out of the spotlight, because obviously this has been going on for 6 months now, like 6-8 months. So why do you think he's decided to stick with her rather than necessarily put someone else in that position? Well, that's up to either of you. Right?
Well, okay, as I said before, there's a precedent set for not doing that, as we've seen for various people who've been accused of the same thing and haven't particularly done anything about it. But also, I think it's really important to know what Priti Patel reflects. As a lot of people kind of celebrate diversity in Parliament, she's a daughter of an immigrant who's BAME, who's a woman. So her, especially being the forefront of Conservative Party politics, is vital for their image. I think that having her there for them and not taking her out is, you could say, arguably too important.
Yeah, I think a lot of it also comes down to pride, and Boris Johnson just not showing that he's not going to kind of turn on the people that he trusts and people that he's close to them. And as Aaron's just said, she is an asset. She is an asset to him. She represents a lot of things that Boris Johnson needs very close to him. And I don't think that he was ever going to. I was listening to the Radio 4 this morning, and they were expecting Boris Johnson to come out with a statement, but they weren't hopeful that he would condemn anything. That they kind of were speaking that Boris Johnson will of course he'll stick by Priti Patel, as if he was never ever even considering whatever the result of the report was. He was always going to stick by her. So it does undermine confidence in reports and people holding government to account, governmental ministers to account. So it's disappointing, to be fair, that this hasn't necessarily been taken as seriously as it perhaps should have done. And in contrast, you've got the Labour Party, so the EHRC. I think they did the report on anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and you've got Keir Starmer and the head of the Labour Party taking that very seriously. And Keir Starmer has taken the report and isn't letting Corbyn back in to be an MP. Yes, he's back in as a member of the party, but he doesn't want him representing anyone in an actual seat, which is quite. So you've got varied in the last few weeks. You've got quite a contrast in how they've taken reports, which is interesting.
Yeah, moving towards the other side of the house, obviously, as Finn just alluded to there, Corbyn's been allowed back into the party. Aaron, what do you think that means for Labour? Do you think that was a good move?
I mean, for Labour, certainly not. I mean, there's a lot of people kind of saying about how he's a dignified man who's got, he's a history of being and supporting anti-racism. But I mean, first of all, he equal to arguably terrorist, or has been defined as terrorist organizations, being Hamas and Hezbollah, as friends. So I mean, who particularly knows about the merits of that? But I mean, what it's really done is just created a massive war. I mean, there was, I think Margaret Hodge said that he was considering quitting the Labour Party, and this is an MP for, a London seat. So it's a pretty big seat which voted leave. So I think it's Dagenham. I think that's what it is. So it was an incredibly terrible move, but this is what you've got. So in Labour, you have various different groups and factions that are just at war at the moment, which was highlighted by the NEC elections, where 5 Corbyn supporters, 4 non-Corbyn supporters were elected to that, which is contrast to, I think, before, where it was all 9 or 7 of them, sorry, was actually Corbyn supporters. So it's gone down, but that was due to different electoral system. But that kind of manifested in this decision, because in the end it was 3 Corbyn supporters to 2. And when you have Corbyn being either ushered in or not, you knew which way it was going to go. So it's disastrous for them. Labour against anti-Semitism have come out disgracing the decision. So I think that kind of shows where it's at the moment.
Yeah, I think you've just alluded to the point I was about to ask. Is this about the fact that the groundwork is still necessary holding the Corbynite sort of fixation, and like the party doesn't want to lose those voters, so they allow Corbyn in as a sort of like sweetener to sort of keep them there for a while?
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make, that they're, because they've backtracked basically. So the decision was to kind of exclude Corbyn from the party. That was made a few weeks ago now, and now they've kind of come back on that. It's been put under review, and Corbyn's been allowed back in, which you need to think of the reasons why that could possibly be. Maybe they were too harsh on him. I disagree. I think that the kind of sentence that he got, or the exclusion from the party, was apt. I think that they need to dispel any anti-Semitic behaviour and remove the stigma that Labour have got as an anti-Semitic party. And Keir Starmer that was the first thing he said, that when he came into power, I will remove this. And by doing what him and the party leaders did, which was like kind of exclude him from the party, I thought that was a very strong and admirable stance that they took. So they weren't going to stand up for any nonsense. And now coming back on it, I think the repercussions of the first decision was perhaps too much. And I think that, as you've just said, a lot of the Corbynites have reacted quite badly to the decision, and don't believe that he should be expelled from the party. And so I think that does have quite a large factor to play in kind of keeping all of the party intact, because it's all factions now, much like the Conservatives. That there are so many moderates, there's so many more extreme factions of the party, that you need to please. You need to please everyone, and the big tent nature of parties nowadays means that it's so difficult to kind of ensure party unity, and that's also seen in the US as well. So I think that's problematic. I think that's where people need to be unified over what their party stand for, and they clearly aren't at the minute, which has played into the decision of Corbyn being allowed back in.
Is this about an identity crisis then for the Labour Party? Because obviously we're talking about 10 years without being in charge. We're on to what, our third leader? Do you think they're just struggling to necessarily find a platform which is worthy of an electoral victory?
Here's the issue that they have right now, is that it appears to be that there's a considerable amount of Corbyn support still within the Labour Party, which, you know, as much as Rebecca Long-Bailey, who was basically one of the 2 prodigies of Corbyn, the other being Laura Pidcock, who voted out in 2019 and is actually now on the NEC. But the fact that she did come second, there's still prominent support. And even then, it's likely that the only reason why Keir won was because Nandy's voters probably split slightly more towards Starmer than Rebecca Long-Bailey. So there's still a lot of support. The NEC elections suggest there's a lot more support. And from what I'm hearing within people I know in Labour, it appears that the Corbyn faction is absolutely, pissed off over all this. And the question is that there have been calls possibly to make a second party and to kind of fight all this, which one councillor decided to start it as soon as Corbyn was actually let back in the party, which I think is quite ironic. But now that he doesn't have the whip, who really knows what's going to happen? Because I think that there's going to be an all-out war over the next couple of years in that party.
Do you think Corbyn, this is the last time Corbyn will stand as an MP when we come around to 2024? We won't see Corbyn standing up again, deciding to be elected. You would have thought not, wouldn't you, Fen?
I think you should always be wary of underestimating Corbyn and his longevity in politics. I think he'll always come back. It's part of why people love him. He's dogged. He's determined. He doesn't give up when faced with adversity, and that is a big part of why people like him, representing the commoners, the Corbynites. He does still stand, and he is still relevant, no matter how many people want to deny that. This finding and readmitting him back in has shown that he still does have some say over how Labour go forward, and I think Keir Starmer has come to appreciate that now. I think when he first came in, he was thinking, right, let's move forward, let's progress, let's kind of change. And try and win back the voters that they've lost through like radical change, perhaps. But now that this has come forward, I think that he is now more wary of the effects of Corbyn and what he's done to the party. And I think you have to appreciate that as the leader and going forward. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here on.
Mm. Yeah, Keir's obviously got another difficult task on his hand at the moment, as just last weekend there was a report about Islamophobia within the Labour Party as well. Aaron, do you want to give a quick summary of what that report sort of stated?
Yeah, so basically it was stating, that around a third of people had, and Muslims specifically, had suffered Islamophobia within the Labour Party. And I think it was 59% of people, 49% of people think that he is not the person to deal with it, and that he's not going to be able to deal with it. So what we had for the last few years was the idea that the Conservatives had an Islamophobia problem, the Labour had an antisemitism problem. But what seems to be apparent is that Labour have got issues with both, which is kind of backed up by what Diane Abbott said on Twitter about Muslims in China calling the race of Muslims in China the province that they were actually in, which was very embarrassing for her. And kind of, I think, shows the extent of the problem within Labour, because they frame themselves as the anti-racist party, but you have two minority factions coming out over the last 5 years saying that there's a problem within this party. So, some would say actions do speak louder than words. So who knows what's going on in that party right now? It is disastrous. Thankfully for them, it's kind of been pushed a bit under the rug with all the craziness that's actually happening right now.
Do you think this is I don't want to say this is too broad, but is this about the idea of a problem within our politics rather than just within the Labour Party? Because obviously if both two parties are struggling with it, isn't that something to be concerned about?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point that you've just raised. It's a broader issue. There's so much going on in politics in the last 5-10 years, but even longer than that. We're in an identity crisis, as you said previously, and many people feel misrepresented. Many people don't feel like that voting in elections will represent how they feel. And I think that, 422 Muslim members of the party, and 59% said that they didn't feel well represented by the party. And then you've got Conservatives who are still, they're dealing with the ramifications of coronavirus, obviously, and the competence surrounding that, and the vaccine, and then obviously Brexit. That issues such as, and it shows that what a pivotal point we are in politics, that these big issues are being pushed under the rug, as Aaron said, because you do have, we're in the middle of a pandemic, or just coming, depends depends on what you see it just coming out the other side of it, perhaps, with the new vaccine. But you've also got Brexit, which has been dominated UK politics for the last 5 years minimum, and we're at a pivotal point in that. So all of these issues are going to be pushed back until something quite disastrous happens. Something radical needs to happen, and the establishment, the elite, aren't doing a good enough job at tackling these very real and very problematic issues that concern the voters, and they're not taking them seriously enough.
Yeah, Aaron, do you want to build on the idea of how I don't know how to frame this, how we can help fix this for both parties? Is this about the parties fixing it, or is this about society fixing itself?
Well, there's three things we need to talk about in regards to this. And first of all is the alternatives, being the other political parties. Ed Davey has not said a single thing since he was elected. At times, I forget he's the leader because of how little he's in the press, how little he's doing anything. The Liberal Democrats, 10 years ago, was pulling ahead of both the major parties at one point. And right now, they're dead in the water. The SNP is having an existential crisis with the Alex Salmond inquiry. They're trying to cover it up at the moment from what it appears. And with a lot of things going on there. And the opposition, being the Tories and Labour, pushing to see what's going on with that. So really, massively, there's a mass problem with British politics right now, because I don't think any party right now is clothing themselves in glory. And it's not so much which is possibly actually why everyone's going to their factions, because no one's really doing a good job. I mean, if you look at the governments, you can have all your qualms with the Conservative government in England and the United Kingdom, but the Welsh Labour Party is having a disaster over there. The Scottish National Party are having a disaster over there. And who knows what's happening currently in Northern Ireland. So British politics is probably in one of the worst states it's been in probably of this century so far.
Brexit, probably Brexit has decided to try and cave in the cracks of the issues within our British politics. I think we've had a good chat there today, boys. I've just got one last thing to say. BU politics students, if you're out there, we're looking for more people to come and participate in our podcasts. So if you want to get involved, either contact David, who you should know, or Aaron, because he will then link you into our group chat and we'll get you involved. Thanks for listening, guys.
Cheers.